Good day, good evening. Welcome to our 6th edition of the Web Talk series program, which is brought to you by the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation in collaboration with CARE Germany. This is a series that looks at the 10 most underreported countries in the world. And today, our focus is going to be on Malawi. So I welcome you all to this very insightful session with the great expertise surrounding us today. And I believe and hope that this is going to be a session that will help change the plight of Malawi people. Thank you very much for making time to be with us. And to the audience, you are actually treasured and welcome to share your questions, your comments on the Q&A platform, which you see at the bottom of your screen. Kindly utilize it, make use of it so that we engage and make hope for the people of Malawi. Thank you so much for this opportunity today. My name is Fungisai Stole. I'm the program manager for the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation in Zimbabwe. Today we are focusing on Malawi. Malawi, which got its independence in 1964, which is generally a very peaceful country, which is an envy to the whole of Africa and is of envy to the world at large. However, in this peace that we see, there is a lot of turmoil behind it. There is a lot of suffering amongst the Malawi people. And despite all this untold suffering, which actually transcends, not only the HIV issues that we talk about in Malawi, there is a lot in Malawi that deserves the attention of the world. Malawi itself is an agro-based economy, an economy that relies on rain-fed agriculture. And because of this form of agriculture that they practice, that they rely on, they are prone to natural disasters. And you would recall that Cyclone Idai of 2019 was one of those natural disasters that wrong-footed the people of Malawi and actually took away the gains and the progresses that have been made over years. As if that was not enough, COVID-19 pandemic has also ransacked the small and peaceful country of Malawi. You'll find that there's been an increase in suicide rates. The Malawi police report that the increase has been by 57% of people committing suicide in Malawi. And some of these suicides are related to the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. And you'll find that Malawi itself has a youthful population. Despite it being densely populated, it is very youthful, with more than 51%, of its people being under the age of 18. Malawi deserves the world's attention. 7 out of 10 people in Malawi live below the poverty datum line. Out of its population of 16 million people, more than half of it, which is 8.3 million, are in need of humanitarian assistance. Malawi struggles with the HIV infection rate. It struggles with its education system. Malawi struggles with the refugees. And the yields from the agriculture continue to dwindle every year. So tonight, not sure if on your side is night or is still day, I'm joined by very, very important people. I have Amos Saindi, the director of CARE in Malawi. I'm also joined by Clement Stambuli. Clement Stambuli is a former minister of the Malawi government. He is also a former member of parliament. He is the country director for the World Tourism Forum Institute in Malawi, and is also the treasurer of the Africa Liberal Network. Clement will give us a short impulse, but before he does that, we also have with us here Stephanie Bale, who is also a very important independent research consultant and a social protection expert, on Malawi with the University of Passau. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us today. And I'll quickly hand over to Clement who will take us through the political and historical situation of Malawi, the humanitarian situation on the ground, what it is like at the moment, and also give us an opinion why he thinks Malawi is underreported. Thank you very much. And Clement, over to you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I'm Clement Stamboli, and I'm in Malawi, popularly known as the warm heart of Africa. Malawi, commonly known as the warm heart of Africa, is endowed by natural resources such as perennial rivers, mountains, and the Lake of Stars, the Lake Malawi, which is Africa's third largest lake, which arguably houses the largest species of fish than any other waterbed in the world. The country also boasts housing Africa's third highest peak, the Sapitwa on Mulanje Mountain. The country also has well-stocked national parks and game reserves, which have the Africa's Big Five. Malawi, formerly known as Nyasaland the Protectorate, became part of the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland in 1954, and later demanded a break of the Federation and became independent in 1964, led by the country's first president, Dr. Hastings Kamuzu Banda, under the Malawi Congress Party. In 1971, the country was declared a one-party state. However, due to the many atrocities that were committed by the government under Dr. Hastings Kamuzu Banda, in 1993, the president of Malawi then, Dr. Banda, called for a referendum to decide whether the country should continue as a one-party state or it should change to multi-party system of government, of which the latter won the election. And then a general election was called in 1994, where Dr. Bakiri Muluzi of the United Democratic Front won. After finishing his 2 5-year terms, Dr. Muluzi nominated a successor in the name of Dr. Bingwa Mutharika, who won as president of Malawi in 2004 under the United Democratic Front. In 2005, Dr. Bingwa Mutharika formed the Democratic Progressive Party while in government and abandoned the UDF, the United Democratic Front, which because of his action ended up an opposition party despite having sponsored him into government in the previous elections. In 2009, Dr. Bingwa Mutharika went back for elections and had Dr. Joyce Banda as his running mate and won the elections. However, about a year down the line, Dr. Bingwa Mutharika fell out of grace with Dr. Joyce Banda and were not in good books, as it were. In 2012, Dr. Bingwa Mutharika died while in office, and in accordance with the Constitution, his vice president, who was his running mate, Dr. Joyce Banda, who was at loggerheads with him, took over as president of Malawi. At this point, Dr. Joyce Banda had formed her own party, and it was ushered into government as a ruling party, despite the DPP, which had won in the 2009 elections. In 2014, elections were called again, and Dr. Peter Mutharika of the Democratic Progressive Party won elections. And in 2019, elections were also called, and the DPP won. Unfortunately, the elections were marred with a lot of irregularities, and the opposition then, Malawi Congress Party and UTM, went to court, and the elections were declared null and void, warranting a French presidential election in 2020, which saw the Malawi Congress Party taking over the reins of government. As you can observe from the controversies above, Malawians were still exercising their patience and waited for the time to exercise their right to vote and not take arms even if the situation warranted such an action. This is all because Malawians are peace-loving people and always welcoming despite the situation they are in. Malawi, as I said, in 2019, had elections and they were declared null and void. And this meant that the entire media was focusing on the issues of politics, especially the elections. They followed the case in court, and the case was being covered live, both by almost all the radio stations in Malawi. And as a result, both the local and international media were focusing on the elections. Needless to say, the elections case was had downplayed all other humanitarian issues in the country, both on the local and international media. And among the many issues that were overshadowed was the element of suicide, which rose by 57% in 2020, especially among the men, due to challenges associated with the COVID-19 that had brought economic challenges, resulting in accumulation of deaths. The suicide situation in the country reached a level of an epidemic, warranting the attention of the social, local, and international media. The COVID-19 challenges came when the country was already gripped by HIV/AIDS, which was causing problems of orphan children who had no direct parental care. However, soon after the advent of COVID-19 issues of HIV were not heard in the local and international media, as if suddenly HIV was non-existent. This gives an impression that the West only care about issues that affect them, since HIV seems to have slowed down in Europe and America, with the availability of drugs that are beyond the reach of the African population. On the other hand, Malawi was not spared by effects of climate change in the 2020. The environmental degradation mostly caused by massive deforestation due to the wanton use of fuel wood by households mostly living below the poverty line in Malawi and the surrounding countries had resulted in two heavy winds and flooding, causing a lot of damage to property and damage of crops, leaving especially rural communities with no shelter and having crops washed away. The washing away of crops left a lot of farming families without enough food, resulting into malnutrition to most rural folks. However, it must be put on record that the challenges above are issues that can be managed if micro and macro planning was in place in the country and other African governments in general. If the press, both local and international, was to raise a flag on the many issues that go unnoticed and were to be given prominence, the government and its cooperating partners would be in a position to look into solutions for the same. But because these issues are left unreported, the government and the international community move on with life as normal. On the other hand, the experience with African governments is that in most cases, there is no much attention given to the humanitarian challenges, because in most cases, African elections are based on ethnic and tribal lines and not on issues and government policy. The African voter must be in the forefront to ensure that elections in Africa move from the ethnic to issue-based elections if politicians are to put more attention on humanitarian suffering which go unreported. And that is the end of my short presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clement, for the detail, the very insightful detail on the situation in Malawi, and for the interesting history where there's been a change of leadership, and in some instances, punctuated by irregularities, as it were. But at least there has always been a transition of one form or another in Malawi. However, as you highlight, that there's a tendency to focus more on elections than the plight of the ordinary people, and the issues, the humanitarian issues, are generally disregarded as elections are given prominence, as it were. Amos, what is your take in this regard? He says that the humanitarian issues are of concern, but are not well reported on.
Yes, Fungai, thank you very much. Clement has alluded to a number of issues affecting why the humanitarian situation in Malawi is mostly underreported. There are a number of issues. I think the bigger issue that he has talked about regarding the 2019 crisis, which coincided with the election. I think, yes, much of the attention of the election, leaving out other crucial issues. But in addition to that, we are also looking at the skills gap and capacity, because our media, to an extent, they require a bit more of upskilling so that they should understand better issues of humanitarian crises. In this case, we are talking about many crises. It's not just flooding. It's not just HIV and AIDS. It's not just COVID-19. It's not just food insecurity. We are talking about all these different humanitarian situations that Malawi finds itself year in, year out. So the issue of skills among our media practitioners, I think it's critical for them to understand how to capture the real issues and package them and take them out there in a way that the international audience would understand and appreciate the situation, right? The implications if the situation is not attended to, and the gains that can get accrued if the situation is managed. That's number one. Number two, it's the behavior and the approach of government, because at the end of the day, it's a government that should also come out and express itself in terms of how the situation is, what is needed, what is government doing, and what is government's ask of others, in order to put the situation under control. What we have seen in other crises is where government is not coming forth because they are preoccupied with other issues, right? So when there is no forthcoming on the part of government to accept that, yes, we have a situation and this is what on our own we are doing, however, we need support. You will see that even other actors that may come in to support, they also come in very slowly because government hasn't opened up. So that's issue number two, which is very critical. So always government has to be at the forefront to acknowledge the situation, look at what government is able to do within its mandate and the resources available, but also be able to put out a clear ask out there in terms of support that is needed. Number three, countries like Malawi, the challenge is what you've said, Fungai, in your opening remarks, that Malawi is a peaceful country, right? It's a very peaceful country where everyone out there at the international level, they nearly forget us. These guys are good, they're fine. Now, there are other emergencies around, either within Southern Africa or in the Great Lakes or in the Horn, that are quite, of heavy magnitude. These crises also overshadow what happens in countries like Malawi and Zambia, which are predominantly peace, and most of the disasters that we face natural disasters, either out of flooding and other related issues. Now, when you put them on scale, you agree with me that you'd find that the Malawi situations will be on the lower side of it when you compare with the crises that are happening in the Great Lakes, in the Horn. So those also overshadow our situation, whereby attention is taken to the DRCs of this world, the Ethiopias of this world, and all that, and then in the course, Malawi is left out. Now, coupled with maybe lack of government proactiveness in profiling the situation, but also our media, then you end up with a situation where we are completely left out. We cannot mobilize resources. I can give you some just quick highlights of what happened with the Cyclone Idai in 2019, where we had over 868,000 people that were affected, right? We had 10,000 children that were affected, 45,000 women that were affected and displaced. And this spreads over 15 out of the 28 districts plus 2 cities, right? Now, in terms of resources, when we had work, some of us are fully involved in the humanitarian response because of the work that we do. The country at that time needed $45 million to respond effectively, save life, restore life and services and all that. And then take those affected communities through the recovery process. What the country was able to mobilize through government and other well-wishers was about 14 million. So we had a deficit of $30 million in order to effectively respond to the situation. So you can see that despite the cause, despite what happened, we couldn't raise enough money to effectively respond. Some of the issues until today, as I'm speaking, we have not implemented what we thought would have been effective recovery interventions to help those communities that were greatly affected by Cyclone Idai. So in my thinking, these 3 aspects I've talked about, they do contribute. Yes, our media needs to be capacitated, government needs to be on the forefront, but also we sometimes get overshadowed by the big crises that surround us in the region, especially the Great Lakes and the Horn. Let me stop there, Fungai, for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amos. And to our audience, please remember to utilize our Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to post them on our Q&A and they'll be responded to by our expert panelists here. Amos, you highlight critical issues here, which you say are multifaceted in a way. The government itself has a role to play, a very huge role to play. But also you say that the media itself needs upskilling. It needs to be strengthened for it to be able to report adequately and in a manner that can attract the global attention. You also highlight that, the peace in Malawi maybe has worked to the disadvantage of Malawians, because nobody then looks at them, everybody thinks everything is fine, yet really Malawians deserve a lot of attention. Stephanie, if you can come in there and also share your thoughts on why Malawi is underreported, as we would expect that Malawi has had its semi-democratic systems functioning in a manner that have made Malawi remain a peaceful nation. Why is it its crises, its challenges are disregarded? Do you share the same thoughts?
Absolutely, I share the same thoughts, and I think the key argument is really the one made by Amos about the overshadowing. And he has already listed a couple of reasons why it is often being overshadowed by other humanitarian crises in the region. And I would just like to add a few more ideas, even though I think the most important ones were already listed, but I would like to add a few more points. One point that I could think of that also plays a role is if one just looks at the media presence. Yeah, if you're looking at, let's say, the big international media, very few of them have a local presence in Malawi. Whereas if we go to Addis, to Nairobi, to South Africa, even Kampala in some cases, yeah, they have correspondents there. So then Apologies for the emergency out there. Yeah, so then if you consider all that, it kind of makes sense that, yeah, Malawi, if it is affected by similar crises as the surrounding countries, that it is Malawi that is sort of the one that is not getting as much attention as the others. So I think that the location of where the media is, the international media, also plays a role in that respect. And another factor that I would like to add is, I think we should also not underestimate the role maybe of a diaspora abroad. And some countries have a very outspoken diaspora that is well connected and may also be able to bring more attention to such issues. And the Malawian diaspora, as far as I can see, is just not one of the more outspoken, better connected diasporas out there. So this certainly adds to what has been said before. Yeah, so these were the two points I would like to add. But apart from that, I agree with everything that was said before.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And you highlight that where the international media is located also works to the disadvantage, of the Malawi people. It sort of peripherizes them, beyond the reach of the international media. Amos, I recognize your hand there. You want to say something briefly?
Yes, I think there's an important point I wanted also to add. Yeah, 2 points. One, there is a tendency in the humanitarian response where we believe that you only run where you are told that things are now getting out of hand. That's where everyone will run. But where things are not seem to be, getting out of hand, we tend to wait until the jar is broken and then we want to get it fixed. I think we are sitting in that space where people say, "Oh, Malawi, it's not a huge situation, so let's not worry about it. But let's maybe focus on, the Great Lakes and the Horn, while things are boiling up." By the time Malawi gets attention, in most cases, it has been at a point when things are almost getting out of hand. People are dying, children are dying, and the situation is out of hand. That's number one. Number two is the issue around the international media. Yes, we don't have the presence, but there is also a tendency where the international media will be interested in a story that will sell at the end of the day. If they report that 50 people in Malawi have drowned or 20 people are, rendered homeless, yes, it's a story for Malawians, but some international media would want to report thousands and thousands and millions. So if they have another story which is talking of millions of people that have been rendered homeless, that story will carry the front page as opposed to the 50 households that have been rendered destitute in a corner of a country called Malawi. So that also needs to be looked at. How do we ensure that whatever situations that are out there, regardless of their size and magnitude, they are also given space, they're also profiled, because one life is worth even a million lives as well. We need to take cognizance of that. So my point here, I think there's something for us to learn all that, what can we do to ensure that even the smaller crises in countries that are deemed stable, are also given space for them to, to get attention from those that may want to come in and support. That's what I thought I should add, Fungai. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amos. And do we really have to wait till the jar is broken for us to start speaking strongly on the situation in Malawi? And as you rightly put it, that being a peaceful country doesn't mean to say that everything is okay. There is need to continue to focus on the humanitarian aspects in that particular country to make sure that people continue to have hope and can live decent lives. We have one question here from Sabina Wilke. She says, what is the situation of women and girls in the country? Are they more affected by the pandemic? And if so, what can be done? Are there positive developments when it comes to gender equality? We all know that when you are in the African continent, and me also being in Zimbabwe here, you understand that the issue of gender equality is very central. I don't know, maybe Clement, you might want to start in there. What is the position regarding gender equality? How are women, affected by all this that is happening in Malawi?
Well, like anywhere else in Africa, we have challenges with regards gender equality. Because by African situation, men still consider themselves being more superior than women. However, with the coming in of various non-governmental organizations and providing civic education, I would say that over the past 10, 15 years, the situation has improved tremendously. There is at least a gap being bridged. However, whenever there is a crisis, the people that suffer most are mostly women and children. Because of the situation in which they are the ones who are mostly in the rural areas as the men go into town looking for employment. So most of these challenges are faced by the women and the kids who are left behind. So I would say in terms of humanitarian crises that affect us, like the example which Amos had given, you'd note that the back of the people that had suffered most were the women and the children. So in brief, I would say there is an improvement, but there is still more room for improvement. And if there can be a way of other institutions coming in to help in bridging this gap, it will be much better, and there is that need. And according to the question, the question was, what can be done? In my opinion, I feel time has come that the international community, the international NGOs should come in and focus much more on the women and the children in order to bridge this gap. Because in an African context, it's mainly the women and the children that suffer most whenever anything has struck. And even when it comes to the issue of the pandemic, whenever, whether it is COVID or any other epidemic that comes in, if it strikes the man, then the women are left with challenges, because the breadwinner is mainly the man in our context. They are the people who mostly run into town doing some work. So in brief, that is what I would say, and I hope Amos would come in and fill up the gaps.
Yes, Amos, if you can come in there. According to the UN Women, we understand that women are often the first responders to a crisis, and they play a central role in ensuring the survival and resilience of families and communities. Yet the issue of gender equality remains a very difficult issue to resolve in Malawi and most probably the bigger part of Africa. Exactly what are the steps that have been taken? I understand there's a bit of progress, but are there any, concrete ones that you're willing to share on?
Yeah, I think Clement has given quite a lot in terms of the impact that rests on women and children, more especially the girl child. I'll give one example with COVID-19. When COVID-19 had, hit us, what happened? We overburdened, our women, because you'd find that you go to the clinic, there were women that were taking care of the sick, even from home, right? So in addition to the roles and responsibilities that women are doing, so the whole issue around taking care of the sick, women were taking lead in that. When we had closed our schools, what happened? 3 months down the line, there were numbers skyrocketing of child marriages, right? There were numbers skyrocketing of teenage pregnancies that mushroomed out of the situation. So as I'm speaking now, we have got teen girls out there who have failed to go back to school because they are nursing a pregnancy, which came as a result of the pandemic. So in terms of the impacts on women and children, quite a lot. What we have done together with government is to focus more on awareness creation, but also empowerment of women. Let our women understand that they play a crucial role. However, they need some level of empowerment, be it economic empowerment, be it their own awareness of their rights and responsibilities, but also engaging women in the debate to ensure that men understand why is it important to protect our women and girls? Why is it important to provide for our women and girls? Why is it important to engage and involve our women in decision making, either at household level or at community level, district level, or even at national level, when it comes to deal with issues affecting the society or the communities. So the initiatives that are happening at the moment, we are trying to look at how do we place the woman at the center of everything so that they are provided, they have all the needs, but also they are well capacitated in order for them to participate, in order for them to be part of the decision making, in order for them to make informed choices regarding their lives, but also the welfare of their families. These are initiatives that NGOs like CARE International, together with the UN Women and the Malawi government, were able to do. We support during at the onset of COVID-19, the first wave, going into the second wave, we conducted a rapid gender analysis for Malawi because CARE has the technical capacity. So together with UN and others, we conducted that. The sole purpose was to identify what are the real causes, what is the situation with our women and girls, and how best can we design interventions that will address these issues. So the things I've talked about, that's what we've contained in different boxes of responses that are going out there. However, the needs are so huge, the resources are not adequate because most of our issues, as we are talking about here, underprofiled. So we can't raise adequate resources in order to deal with the magnitude of issues that we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thanks, Amos. The problem is huge, and the pace is small, and but there are steps, there are efforts being made to address the issues of gender equality. And Stephanie, you raised an interesting point here when you mentioned that there is need to make sure the diaspora also, or speak out more. They challenge more the issues around the crisis that is happening in Malawi. And there's, would you mind to speak to that, but also zero in on what social media, how social media could be helpful to Malawians, and why is it they are not using social media as much as they should do?
Yeah, we'll try to, but of course, I mean, since I'm not Malawian myself and also not a very active social media user, I can only touch the surface of it. So the first point I would like to make is that, yes, there is a very active Malawi Twitter in particular and so on, but it seems to be very contained. I don't think it links up a lot with like the broader social media space. So it's very, Malawi Twitter is very active, but it doesn't go far beyond. That is my observation. And as for the diaspora, the very fact that I'm just not even aware of any kind of organized Malawian diaspora may either be a reflection of my ignorance or just really be a reflection that they do not organize by comparison to other places. But yeah, I don't have official information on that. And well, if they existed, then of course there would be potential for that. But if they are not organized at this point already and not well connected, then I think there is nothing one can really do about this in the short term. And in the end, that is anyways not something where government or other organizations can do much. This either is there or it isn't there. I don't think there's so much one can engineer in that respect, apart from maybe encouraging a few change maker if there are some well-known people across the world. But yeah, I can't say too much on that.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And Amos, would you mind speaking a bit more on social media in Malawi, its use, and maybe why the diaspora is not really harnessing it so much?
Right. There are two aspects. Stefan has talked about it already. That yes, we have the handles, the Twitter and others, and all that as Malawi, but they're not able to go that far. That's issue number one. As Malawians, I think the use of social media has increased. We have seen this from the last election that Clement has talked about. I don't want to go into the election issues and all that. Most of the things that happened there, social media played a crucial role in terms of mobilizing the citizens to take action. You know, people following on issues, people following on tips and all that. Social media has done so much, including the COVID-19 response. For the first time in Malawi, we saw citizens taking the initiative of mobilizing their own resources when they noted that little that is coming from our development partners. Through social media, enormous resources were mobilized, both in country as well as from the few Malawians that we have out there. Number three, I think it's the quality of the diaspora, the Malawian diaspora community that we have out there. You know, we may not be in the numbers and in terms of the profiles, in the quality that you would have when you compare with other countries like Ethiopia and all that. Well-organized structures and all that. For Malawi, out there, it's not that organized, but also we don't have large numbers out there who can, mobilize themselves and also help to profile the issues happening back home, but at the same time help to also mobilize resources. But what we have seen, we are on the right track in terms of the utilization of the social media, in amplifying the issues, raising resources, getting attention of the duty bearers to take certain action. That is happening in country. But the key issue we're raising here, I think, is the issue at the international level. How do we ensure that our issues are profiled there? The issue I talked about earlier on of the international media being attracted to the big emergencies. There's something that I want to say here, which is very funny. And it has happened to me every day as I'm sitting in my office. I'm getting requests from international media who would want me to speak on certain issues regarding COVID-19. Instead of them asking questions that will profile the situation, they'll pick on what they consider are gray areas. I'll cite one or two issues here. For the past, when there was a report that Malawi had 16,000 doses expired, I was bombarded with requests from all the major international media houses wanting to actually dig further and say, Malawi has failed, the government has failed, how come they ended up with 16,000 doses, expiring within their hands? Is it the issue of logistical arrangement? Is it because of the political will? I was telling them that no, it's not. So when you tell them the right story, they were not interested even to write about it, because the issue was not about government failing. The issue was not about citizens wanting to go and get vaccinated. It wasn't about logistical challenges. It was about the confusing information that was coming from the global West, where these vaccines are manufactured. So people were asking questions. If today Europe is saying this, remember, we're in a global world. If anyone posts in Europe or in the Americas, within minutes, within seconds, everyone will be able to see. The smartphones are now penetrating even in the rural area.
Sorry, Amos. So how do we change the narrative? You highlight that the media is interested, in the big emergency issues. They are interested in, when you talk of millions of people that have been. We actually have a question from the audience in that regard. So how do we change the narrative so that these issues that you highlight are reported on adequately?
Yes. But then the other point that I want amplified here is where some of the international media houses would only want to talk about countries like Malawi when there is negative story coming out. So that's something that we need to deal with. So the international media has also to change in terms of its approach to these issues. That's number one. Number two, we need to create awareness among the both local and international media on the need to ensure that some of these issues are also profiled, especially from countries like Malawi, Zambia, and others. Number three, I would give an example of the COVAX arrangement. The COVAX arrangement when it comes to COVID-19 is an arrangement that is trying to balance so that whether countries that have got less, issues, less resources, they also have access to get, the vaccine, right? Otherwise, if the COVAX arrangement was not in place, countries like Malawi would have struggled even to get the first dose of vaccine. So that platform has worked. Can we also adopt a similar arrangement where within the international media, but also local media, there must be some principles that will ensure that as much as they will focus on the big emergencies, there should also be room where small emergencies are also given profile. Some are forgotten emergencies that have gone on and on for 5, 6, 10 years. We've seen that in other parts of the world. So the Malawi situation, yes, unique, but we've seen also forgotten crises where now the stories from such crises don't make even exciting to be on the front page. So can we get a similar arrangement like the COVAX within the media world, where the principle will be, whether it's big or small, let us create a balanced arrangement where everything should get space and be profiled. I think that would be better. Let me stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Amos. Clement, may you also just zero in there on the need to have a balanced reporting. The big and small emergencies should be adequately reported on. The positives and the negatives from Africa should be reported on. What is your take, and what do you think could be the way forward on that?
Well, on that one, let me start first with the issue of the social media. I would want to allude on what Amos has said. The social media in Malawi has developed, and in fact, most of the stories that are being covered locally and some internationally, the source is first and foremost from the social media. The social media is helping in providing the basic source of stories around. There are issues which have been followed up by the police and other agencies, issues such as defilement or underage marriages or people getting involved in sexual elements with the underage people, underage girls. This has been brought up mostly through the social media. And I would want to go back a bit. Before the advent of the social media, and when the airwaves were not open within Africa, there was a lot of coverage by the international media, the BBC, the Deutsche Welle, VOA, because they were having interest in covering stories from Africa, and also Africans in Africa were piping leads and stories into the Western media because that was the only point where their story would behave. And this has unfortunately stopped because most of the issues are being covered locally, whether it be through the social media or the local media in a way. So that has also hindered in providing stories to the West. What we need to do is to ensure that at least there is also the international media should at least continue having their sources within Africa. And Africans should also continue being a source of stories into the international world, which unfortunately has stopped. And as a result, our stories are not being held anywhere. When Malawi was going through the referendum in 1993, for example, there was a lot of coverage on BBC. There was a lot of coverage on Deutsche Welle. There was a lot of coverage on VOA. These things are not happening. And as a result, we're having attention. We're having all sorts of training by international organizations, training the journalists in Malawi. As Amos has already put it, there is also need to re-equip our journalists in order for them to be in a position to cover some of these stories. So there is a lot of work that should be done locally. But that work can only bear fruition if the international media is able to respond. Even organizations such as CARE, organizations such as FNF, they should come in and develop an interest in ensuring that they are able to train and re-equip our journalists in Africa, in Malawi, in Zambia, where there is a gray area in terms of coverage. Because coverage is only being done where it bleeds. As we normally say in the media world, that when it bleeds, it leads. But when it is normal, like in Malawi, and the emergency is not as big as it is in other countries, such as the DRC, as Amos has put it, we are left in the cold. So there is need for us also to be able to narrate and talk our own story, where we are not doing well, and we need to step up. And also we need a hearing ear from the international media, so at least the coverage can be normalized.
Thank you so much, Clement. And just to turn over to Stephanie, we know that Malawi, as we highlighted before, that it's rain-fed, it relies on rain-fed agriculture, and it suffered heavily from the impacts of from the impact of Cyclone Idai in 2019. And from your point of view, an external, expert point of view, with regards to the problems of climate change facing Malawi, but also the problems related to COVID-19, what can government do to assist, but also from a European point of view, what can Europe do? So from two angles, what can the government of Malawi do, and what can the European community do? Kindly advise, please, Stefan.
Thank you. So let me start with what the Western governments can do. I think in the short term, it just whenever there are these calls for help from the Malawian government, as Amos mentioned earlier, when it's specified we need this and that much in order to address the acute needs, then I think the governments just simply have to step up and contribute more to those. I think that is a straightforward thing. Then apart from that, when it comes to more medium to long-term solutions, I would like to broaden our view a little bit by not only focusing on the humanitarian response, but maybe finding ways how the system in Malawi can become less reliant on humanitarian responses, and instead we can maybe set up systems or strengthen existing systems, strengthen the government, so that a lot of these challenges, which are not so surprising, I mean, they occur frequently, they're recurrent, they are to some extent even predictable. I mean, I'm not talking about COVID now, but about the shocks and the rest, all this is known. So systems can be set up to address that on a more recurrent basis and to be ready for that, so that the humanitarian sector can then focus more on those truly unexpected and exceptionally high shocks. So I think what's really that needs to be the focus both of the national support, but also the priority of the Malawian government, is to gradually build up these local systems. As a social protection expert, of course, I would advocate here for strengthening the social protection systems, but also other related systems. And as they are scaled up gradually, one can move away from these more ad hoc humanitarian reactions. But in all fairness, of course, the humanitarian sector has already realized that, and a lot more of their activities is already going into that direction, even though they have to play both roles at this point in time. But I think for the future, there can be no doubt that this is where it has to go. Because this, we can't act surprised every year that, oh, there's a shortage, there's food insecurity. No, this is more or less predictable. And to the extent that there is a need to have programming and strategies to deal with that, so that the humanitarian system is not overburdened with that as well. And there's a lot of it already there. There's very nascent systems, but something that can be expanded on. I won't go into details at this point, but I'm just saying there is a lot there to work with. It just now takes the government, especially the new government, to really make that a priority. And at this point in time, as far as I've seen, unfortunately, I don't see too much movement in that direction. Instead, they seem to be focusing a lot on some of the, you know, more established policies like the fertilizer subsidies and these kind of things that are politically very popular in Malawi, but I feel don't really address these issues. I would leave it at that, but of course there would be a lot more to say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Stephanie. You know, and you point out clearly that the European community needs to step up and contribute more and support more so that at least the people of Malawi can actually be served and supported as well. And Clement, you want to come in quickly on that? Maybe I can give you just maybe 30 seconds to a minute. You are on mute, Clement. Unmute yourself.
In this context, it's unfortunate that in most cases, the West comes in, our Western cooperating partners do come in with issues of training and civic education, training the people on how this can be done, investing so much into issues of training and not issues of action on the ground. You have clearly pointed out that our challenge is that we depend on rain-fed agriculture. And yet we have got a lot of sites where we can have dams made. Instead of simply coming in, identify the areas which are already identified and cited, and start the construction of dams, harvest the water, and start having massive irrigation. We spend a lot of time in discussions, a lot of time in research and other things. The problems on the ground in Malawi is that we need to ensure that our people are able to farm 2 times or 3 times a year using irrigation. The answer is irrigation. And we do have enough and a lot of rains that we can be able to harvest, build dams, and be able to do meaningful agriculture, which is lacking. So our problem is that we need the West, we need the government to come in and invest into irrigation. As correctly said and rightly put, the issue of fertilizer subsidy, yes, it has been there. But even to me, when I was in government, we did the same thing. It has continued until now, but I do not think that it has given the impact that we thought it would give. The answer is irrigation. Once we have good irrigation, once we have dams constructed, we will be sure that at least our people will have food all year round.
Thank you, Clement. You say the solution lies in training and civic education of our people. We cannot continue relying on rain-fed agriculture. We need to develop techniques and skills around issues of water harvesting and everything else to make agriculture meaningful. But Stephanie, you raised an issue that the government needs to gradually build, policies around social protection. How can it be implemented in a setup like that of Malawi? Yeah, just in a minute.
Well, there is already a lot there. There are some elements of a social protection system, but I think what is lacking at this point is just that the government takes ownership of it, and there is a clear path that they lay out where they really want to get to, and then tell also the international community where they can come in. Right now, it's pretty much a piecemeal approach, I would say. And I think going forward, it's all about government taking a stance, developing a strategy, and then telling others where they can come in, rather than everybody doing like their thing, and instead, and then it not leading towards a more like proper system building. Yeah, I think in short, that's it.
Thank you. So there is need for much harnessing, and bringing everything together to be able to develop a meaningful social protection program. May I ask Amos, just your closing remarks? What do you think is, the key to addressing the underreportage in Malawi?
No, what we need is to create awareness among our international media partners. They are our partners in development. So let's create an awareness on the need for them to also create space in profiling issues coming from countries like Malawi, or pulling out onto their front pages some of these stories of humanitarian situations that are on small to medium scale. So we need a balancing approach. So I think that's a lobbying that we need to have. We know they're in business, that's a fact. Therefore, we cannot demand, we need to lobby on the need for them to, start to balance. We also need our local media to also up their game, the issue of skills development. Clement has talked quite well about it. By the way, he is also a practitioner, an experienced one for that matter. So he understands these issues better than some of us. So we need our local media practitioners to also look at their skills to understand how best to profile these issues from the local front and then feed into the national stage. We want to see alliances. Clement talked about the way Malawi was flooded with the Deutsche Welles and the BBCs and all that at the time of shifting from one party to multi-party system of government. So we want our local media to reestablish and re-engage with the international media and establish sustainable partnerships that will ensure that when stories are emerging from at this end, those stories could get amplified at a higher level. Then I talked about government taking a leading role to ensure that implementation, to ensure that they're also leading on policy issues that Stefan has talked about. These will help us to get somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for a very exciting, and insightful discussion we had today. You have highlighted that for Malawi to regain or to be well positioned within the whole competitive global dynamics, there is need for the upskilling of the local journalists in Malawi. There is need for the government to take a leading role. There is need for the capacity building, the training of people to practice meaningful agriculture. There is need for social protection, as it were. And all I can say is thank you very much for putting Malawi in the limelight and for showing its root cause to the world. We have come to the end of our session today. We'll have our next session, which will be focusing on Pakistan as one of the most underreported countries in the world. So thank you very much. And from the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation and in collaboration with CARE, thank you so much to the audience for the very insightful questions that you shared with us today. And from me, Fungisa Istole, and the panelists, Stefan, Clement, and Amo.